Every club.
Every day.
The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the Daily Newcastle. I'm Michael Grahamslaw and today we're doing something a little bit different. This is a bit of a Winter Wildcard episode. There's no match previews, no post-match ratings or reviews, no refereeing rants. Can't promise anything there actually. And instead I am making 10 bold predictions for the second half of the Premier League season. Some of them will feel sensible. Some will feel maybe a little outrageous. And at least one of them will come back to haunt me in May. But that's the fun of it. Football should be fun, and with the sheer number of VAR controversies and last-minute goals we've conceded over the last few weeks and months, I'm bringing fun back. So let's cut through the noise. These aren't hopes. These aren't wishes. They're predictions. So let's begin with prediction number 1, and maybe one of the boldest of the lot. Lewis Miley will be nominated for Young Player of the Year in the Premier League. Well, Young Player of the Season, should I say. I want to start a bit close to home. There's 3 Newcastle predictions and about 6 or 7 that probably do impact Newcastle in some way or have a bit of a toony side plot. But the first is that Lewis Miley will be nominated for Young Player of the Season in the Premier League, and it won't be a little token inclusion. What is remarkable about Lewis Miley isn't his age, it's the composure, the understanding of space, and the refusal to play like someone who is just happy to be there. It's not a case of you'll never look at Lewis Miley and go, oh, well, at least he works hard. It's one of those where every single game, he has quality on the ball, he's reliable, and it doesn't matter where he plays, he puts in a brilliant shift. And that is what Eddie Howe absolutely loves in players at Newcastle United. And the fact that they're reliable is just an extra bonus. I don't think Joe Linton walks back into this team anymore. I don't think Ramsey or Willock displace Lewis Miley. And I think he stays there for the foreseeable future. He doesn't hide, he doesn't rush, and he doesn't treat the ball like a hot potato. He is one of those players that wants the ball and he wants to influence the game as much as he can. And for a Newcastle side with so many games to play this season, Lewis Miley has already been a little bit of a standout player with less game time. He isn't just going to fill a gap, he's going to reshape expectations, and he's playing with rhythm, connects phases, and most importantly, he belongs in that midfield. Second half of the season is going to bring more starts, more responsibility, and probably more scrutiny, but he'll handle it so well. And let's be honest, he probably won't win the award. It'll probably go to Morgan Rogers, I would imagine. It's not the point. You can count that as a prediction, by the way, but it's not in the 10. But the point is he'll get the recognition, and it's a signal that Newcastle United aren't just building for the future. We're already living in it. And then prediction number 2, it's probably apt that I mentioned Morgan Rogers because it is focusing a bit on Aston Villa. Prediction number 2 is that Aston Villa will finish 3rd, but they won't be in the title race by the end of March. And a lot of people compare Newcastle and Aston Villa. For now, I'm not going to do a lot of those comparisons, but Unai Emery deserves enormous credit. You can see why he was the number 1 choice for the Saudis when they took over at Newcastle. He's been tactically excellent, emotionally resilient, and so ruthless at home. For large parts of the first half of the season, they've looked like they might end up being genuinely in that title conversation. But after the first 3 or 4 games, they were looking like surprise relegation candidates. Morgan Rogers was being booed. Emery out was trending on X. And it's one of those where he's managed to turn it around with an excellent run of form. But here's the thing about title races. They don't really care about good stories. And by March, Aston Villa will still be an excellent team. Still dangerous, still well coached. But they won't be there. They'll be there. Which, for those listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, slightly lower down, but not quite at the pinnacle of football. And the squad depth will tell. They've got decent depth, not brilliant, but they're not playing in the league phase of the Europa League. It could come February, March. They're going to be playing knockout football, and those fine margins that separate third from champions is going to tell. They were absolutely excellent against Arsenal, and they've been pretty excellent in a lot of games this season. There's somewhere the luck has gone their way, and finishing third would still be an extraordinary achievement. I think anyone but Manchester City, Liverpool, and Arsenal would snap your hand off for third at the start of a season. And it'll feel like real progress for them, and not disappointment, despite where they are at the moment. But the title race, it's going to narrow before we get to the end of the season, realistically. They've got a really tough run of fixtures in January and March. They'll need to hope Arsenal and Manchester City have poor runs. And let's be honest, second half of the season, Arsenal usually falter a little bit, but Chelsea, well, they're not even in the conversation. Manchester City, that's where they normally shine. And let's be honest, this season, nobody is going to get 100 points. Probably not even 90. Villa will end up with 70 plus points, though, in my opinion, by the end of the season. But when this 10-game winning run ends, you do imagine they're going to come crashing down to earth a little bit. And when fixtures get a little bit harder, they'll still be getting good draws. But draws don't win you titles. Unless you're the Invincibles, should I say. But that's pretty much it for Villa. They've been incredible, and you do just have to hold your hands up and say fair play to Aston Villa this season. They've been incredible since that poor start. But when your manager calls you lazy in the opening games of the season, you've kind of got something to prove, and that's exactly what they've done. Top three kind of relates to point two, but the top four will distance themselves considerably from the rest by April. Let's be honest, this season has flirted with the idea of chaos. Neutral fans will be looking at the likes of Sunderland up there and thinking, oh, we could see a shock. Newcastle fans have been seeing Sunderland up there and going, why won't you just lose? And then watching ourselves lose in the last minute of some games. But let's be honest, in the opening stages, mid-table teams have been able to beat anyone on their day. Injuries are flattening the Giants, and the table's been so compressed and unpredictable. That isn't going to last. It never does. The odd exception, Leicester winning the league, etc. But by the time you reach April, the top four will have created clear daylight. I'm not saying 20 points, but it'll be enough to make the race for third and first feel exclusive. There will be a gap between the top two, I think, as well. And the reason for that is because elite squads adapt. They rotate, they grind out 1-0s when their legs are gone. Newcastle aren't quite there, where we've kind of just brought in the depth. We're not really adapted to everything just yet. We're still getting the rotations in, but we're not grinding out the wins, just like Aston Villa did against Manchester United most recently. It's an ugly, ugly win, but it was one that looked so beautiful because of that Morgan Rogers goal and the fact it's a win against a decent Man United side. They win ugly, these top teams, and it'll be January and March when these teams are winning ugly, where they pull away a little bit from Aston Villa, but Villa stay in the hunt and stay considerably higher than 5th, 6th, etc. And this season, I think, people say the table doesn't lie. The table always lies before, I want to say January, but yeah, the table always lies before February, in my opinion. You can never really tell how a team is going to do until after January, until the 19 games, and even then, teams that are playing twice. Some teams are playing Arsenal, Manchester City, etc. twice. Some are playing Burnley. By February, March, you usually have an idea of how the table is gonna line up. The truth always tells, should we say, come the end of the season. This season will be no different. The top four is going to be Arsenal, Manchester City, Aston Villa, and Liverpool. I do think Liverpool will significantly improve in the next 6 months. Villa are there on merit, obviously, and then Arsenal and Manchester City are the no-brainers. Top four will move away, and fifth is going to be a different story entirely. And it'll be a big battle for it, but it does lead into my fourth prediction that Newcastle United will qualify for Europe. Yeah, that's a bit of a big one. When you look at the table, especially Newcastle United, I think will get European football next season, and that's not because everything has gone smoothly this season, because it hasn't, and it's not because injuries will suddenly disappear, because they won't. But Newcastle United always get better in the second part of the season, and to be honest, as long as we're still in the hunt, at this stage of the season, I'm pretty confident that Eddie Howe can turn it around, and that is because we still have the structure, we still have the belief, and crucially, we still have St James's Park. And the quote that I'm seeing so often on social media is, "We've still got to play Arsenal, Liverpool, Manchester City, and not Chelsea away. There's no way we're getting European football." And while that is true, it also means that if the top teams are coming to us and that's who we're playing the home games against, we're also playing our away games, where we've always been pretty dire, against those mid teams like your Brightons, like your Bournemouths, who you do expect to beat at home, but then away from home, you're always going, it's a tough game, that. So we're travelling to that so-called middle class, lower class of teams. And when you look at the teams who still have to come to St James's Park, Crystal Palace, we usually beat them. Leeds United, newly promoted, we tend to do well. Let's not talk about last week. Aston Villa, usually do well against them at home. Away, we're terrible. Brentford, Everton, Manchester United, Sunderland, Bournemouth, Brighton, and West Ham. Now, there's some teams in there who will give you a bit of PTSD. Brighton and Danny Welbeck for one. West Ham in the 2-0 last season. Bournemouth can always throw up a surprise. Same with Everton. But you're looking at those games and going, every single one of them, you would be disappointed on the day if Newcastle United didn't win. All 10 of those games are winnable. Now, will we win them all? Absolutely not. That's not the Newcastle United way. But you win 7, draw 1, lose 2. That's still 22 points, which puts you on 55. 60 tends to be enough for European football. We also have to travel to Burnley, Wolves, Fulham, Nottingham Forest, 4 of the bottom 6 currently. So, yes, do things have to improve? Absolutely. Have we shown signs of improvement over the last month? Yeah, I would say to a degree. You take the derby out, and it's actually been an okay month, results-wise. But if we're still at panic stations this time next month, I'll be very, very surprised, because you look at the fixtures lined up. Old Trafford, Man United away, always a tough game, but they're missing so many players. It's one of those where you look into it, and Newcastle, we might not be favourites, but you'd expect a draw. Burnley away, you've got to be expecting wins, and then you've got 4 home games in a row. What in the FA Cup, League Cup, semi-finals? We're not expecting anything really in the League Cup semis, but a home to Bournemouth, round 3 of the FA Cup. You'll see there what Eddie Howe's plan is. Do we play a rotated side and go, you know what, we need to focus on the league? But before that, Crystal Palace and Leeds United, 2 home games in a week. We do tend to grind out these wins at home. We do tend to do very well against Crystal Palace. And then the away game after that, Wolves away. And you've got to be expecting 3 points from the team that pick up 2. However, I'm a Newcastle United fan, and I do remember Derby and Kenny Miller. So maybe I shouldn't be saying all this. But I am very, very confident that this time next month, and it'll be the day after we've played PSV in the UEFA Champions League stage, we'll be so much more confident about Newcastle United's season. And if we're not, then I'll start to worry a little bit. But as it stands, it's going to go down to the wire. But Newcastle United will be back in Europe next season. Whether it's Europa League or the Conference League, I don't know. But it'll matter so much more than people realise. Even getting in the Conference League, where you're playing teams from Finland on a Wednesday or something like that, that will still be massive for our fan base, and we'll still love it. Sure, it's not going to compare to the Parc des Princes, the new camp people have done before. We've played at the San Siro recently. Going to Helsinki ain't really the same, but it would be so, so good for the fans. And then prediction 5, I mentioned Wolves, I mentioned Derby in the last one. So it'll give you an idea of what's coming. But in the meantime, I'm going to go to a quick ad from Bionique.
Your body is unique. And Global Sports Podcast Network has partnered with Bionique, the world's most personalised supplements. Bionique provide 100% tailor-made supplements designed to deliver precisely what your body needs at exactly the right levels to optimise your health. No guessing. So click the link in the show notes. Use the code GSPN2025 for 40% off your first month's subscription. Bionique. Don't settle for off-the-shelf solutions made for just anybody. Get what's right for you right now.
All right, this one's going to raise a few eyebrows, but stay with me. Prediction number 5 is that Wolves will beat Derby's record of 11 points. And some of you will be sitting there and going, yeah, sounds about right. And some of you who have watched Wolves maybe a bit more this season will go, I've got no idea where they're getting points from because they've already played a lot of the worser teams at home and lost. But Wolves will finish with more points than Derby County's infamous 11-point season. And I'm saying it explicitly because superstition demands clarity. Wolves are not good. They're not average. Probably a word that I shouldn't be saying, but they're not that bad. At least under Rob Edwards. And he will know exactly what they need in January. And for me, one of the things they need is experience. You look at that Wolves lineup, very, very young, very, very inexperienced. And when things kind of hit the fan, they don't really know what to do. You bring in those experienced players, like they've had in the past with Craig Dawson, etc. They can help you grind out those results. But under Edwards, that's what they've exactly been trying to do. They've been trying to grind out results. They nearly did against Arsenal, Aston Villa and Nottingham Forest. They're a lot more organised and they do tend to frustrate teams, which probably isn't great with Newcastle coming to town soon. But with more experience in that team, they'll be capable of drawing more matches and gradually building up their confidence and getting more points, something Derby simply couldn't do. But it's something that Southampton had just enough of to avoid the same total last season. You've also got Strand Larsen, someone Newcastle fans are very, very familiar with. 14 league goals last season, just one this year. It's quite obvious his head was turned in the summer. I'd say we'd apologise to Wolves fans for that, but they'd probably still be getting relegated even if he was on form. But I do think their home game against West Ham, January 3rd, I think that is, will be their first win, and they won't end up with over 20 points, but they'll have a small run of form and they'll end up with around 15, 16. The comparison between Wolves and Derby will linger in the headlines, and with Aston Villa doing so well, Birmingham potentially getting promoted as well, it's going to be one that stings for Wolves fans. But I think they'll clear the bar to an extent where it'll stop being funny, although it might not save Rob Edwards from losing his job, which, to be honest, after leaving Middlesbrough and the way that he did, it's funny on the Middlesbrough side of things. Thankfully for them, should I say, they've started doing pretty well under new manager as well. But the way Rob Edwards left, I wasn't particularly fond of it, and it's almost karma. And karma's something I'll get to actually in a bit. But not in this prediction. Prediction number 6. Tottenham Hotspur will once again finish closer to 17th than to Europe. And yeah, it's not one that we haven't spoken about before, but everyone thought that Spurs would be significantly better under Thomas Frank. And although it might have started that way, it certainly won't finish that way. And it's not about chaos or collapse like it has been in previous years. It's this exposure that people didn't really identify under Ange Postecoglou because of said chaos. I actually quite liked Big Ange. Football was brave, admirable, entertaining, and it won him time and gave them a European trophy win. Now, would I take him at Newcastle United? Absolutely not. But Thomas Frank hasn't performed better than Big Ange did. And that is the reality. That football is poor and the team is quite simply cowardly. But that isn't the biggest point, in my opinion. The Premier League is very unforgiving. And it punishes teams like Tottenham, who have, unfortunately, a squad of very, very injury-prone players. injuries hurt a team. Even if it's one injury, it can impact a team. And their squad depth was stretched last year. It was stretched this year, and it doesn't seem like they've learned. Opponents have already learned how to beat Spurs under Thomas Frank. Fortunately, Newcastle also know how to concede twice to a defender against them. But most teams have learned when to sit, when to counter, and when to let Spurs have the ball without fear, because they simply won't be able to break you down. Let's be honest, Spurs ain't getting relegated. The quality in the league's too poor for that. But come May, they'll be able to look down a lot more than they'll be able to look up. Should be the reverse of that, actually, but they'll be looking down a lot more than they'll be looking up, because they're so much closer to that relegation zone. And that early season optimism will certainly feel like a different lifetime. Prediction number 7, probably the most sensible one of the lot. Manchester City will win the Premier League. Some predictions don't need fireworks. City are going to win the league. It's because they always do it when it matters. They recover from wobbles, they turn draws into wins, and I'll be honest, the second half of the season always belongs to Manchester City. Others will fade, others will blink, City won't. And Pep Guardiola is so good in a title race. It's not going to be pretty, it's not going to be historic, but it will be inevitable. Arsenal are going to drop off. Everyone speaks about defensive injuries over the last month and how well they've done without Gabriel and Saliba playing. But unfortunately for them, or maybe fortunately for them actually, the fixtures in that time haven't really been that difficult. And in April, I think we'll see a number of points that open the door for City to overtake them. They've got some really tough fixtures in that time. City, second half of the season, different beast. And unless Erling Haaland gets injured, City are the top goal scorers in the league for a reason. He is going to be the top goal scorer in the league for a reason. And he's going to carry them on his back to that next title. And then prediction number 8, another striker that I think will carry a team to, let's say it is Champions League football, and that's it. Prediction number 8, Hugo Eketike will be the best of the summer striker signings. And this one's pretty personal because it's a case of what might have been for us Newcastle fans. I do think Hugo Eketike will emerge as the best of the summer striker signings. It hasn't been immediate. He started quite explosively, but he's going to turn into the best, in my opinion, quite steadily because of the injury to Alexander Isak, who will be out for a large chunk of the season, if not the entirety. Hugo Eketike is now the main man, and to be honest, he should be. Eketike's form dropped when Isak started getting back into the team. Of course, he had that stupid yellow card against Southampton, which saw him miss out a game through suspension. But Eketike's game is all about movement, timing, confidence, and you can really see why Eddie Howe and the team wanted him at Newcastle United. The first half of the season has been about learning the league, the physicality, the pace, the scrutiny, and establishing himself as that number one striker. And while he hasn't quite done it, he certainly performed better than his rival for the position, Alexander Isak, and he'll have that role for the rest of the season. And while the rest of the Liverpool team begins to build up, it's only going to improve things for Hugo Eketike. He's going to really express himself, I think, in the second half. Goals will come, performances will lift, and the narrative around him will be very, very different in 6 months, I think. And I will just say, on the note of Alexander Isak, it's a bit of a difficult one because I will never celebrate a player getting injured, and it is a horrific injury for the Swedish striker. However, what I am going to say is karma seems to have a way of coming around and biting players on the arse. And I guarantee Liverpool fans are going to listen to this and go, well, what about Yohan Wissa? It happened to Yohan Wissa. He got injured in his first game for Senegal since moving to us, then couldn't play for us. Karma. So Liverpool fans will say it happened to Trent Alexander-Arnold. By the way, if you're talking about how horrible Newcastle fans have been to Isak, look in a mirror. And it's happened to Alexander Isak. All three players accused of pretty horrible moves or horrible antics to get to their moves, all got injured. Karma, fair enough. And it's happened to Alexander Isak. And am I happy that he's stunk out the gaff since moving to Liverpool? Absolutely. But realistically, no one should celebrate a potentially career-defining injury. So I do hope he comes back to Liverpool. I do hope the injury isn't too bad. But I also hope that he doesn't score again for them. So at least I can laugh while he plays, rather than him Michael Owen in the medical room for a few years. But that's all I'm going to say on Isak. Prediction number 9. This one got 2 on. The next 2 are going to be manager ones. They might end up relating to each other, but I don't think they will. But you never know. Prediction number 9 is that Oliver Glasner will be announced Manchester United manager at the end of the season. It's going to be a managerial merry-go-round towards the end of the season. Let's be honest, it always is. Oliver Glasner is probably the next big name on the block. And I think he'll be announced as the next manager of Manchester United. The Ruben Amorim experiment simply hasn't worked. And Jim Ratcliffe will know in his stingy little pockets that he can't get rid of any more staff and that the team actually has to perform better. But they can't go through a complete change in philosophy and tactics once again because they simply don't have the money to do so. So they'll want to experience something similar, but with a bit more structure and discipline at the back, and somebody who can impose their identity without the theatrics that we've seen from Ruben Amorim. And Oliver Glasner fits that profile almost scarily. It's not an appointment about vibes or nostalgia. It'll be about control, about rebuilding, and rebuilding that credibility without the chaos. And to be honest, I don't think there's anyone better to do it than a manager who has succeeded almost everywhere that he's gone. He revolutionised Wolfsburg. He won the Europa League with Eintracht Frankfurt. And let's be honest, he's been very, very impressive with his success in England with Crystal Palace, winning the FA Cup and the Community Shield, and having a very, very decent Premier League season as well. He's a very fine manager who looks incredibly likely to leave Crystal Palace at the end of the season. And honestly, if Newcastle United and Eddie Howe were to part ways at the end of the season, Glasner is a name I'd be pretty excited to see take over. And that leads me to prediction number 10. The final prediction is one that will hurt me, and it will hurt a lot of Newcastle United fans. Eddie Howe will leave Newcastle United at the end of the season. Now, obviously, this isn't confirmed. It's not gospel. I don't know how a clip will go out. And I don't think Eddie Howe will be sacked. I don't think he'll be pushed. I think mutually, quietly, and respectfully, the cycle will end. The Saudi ownership will acknowledge the fact that Howe has absolutely transformed this football club, lifted expectations, and delivered nights, days that we will never, ever forget. But football, especially at this level, rarely allows long goodbyes. And as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't allow for happy endings. The departure won't feel like a failure. I still think Newcastle will get into Europe, as I mentioned earlier, and it'll feel like a bit more of a transitional move, not just for Newcastle, but for Eddie Howe as well. And Newcastle will undoubtedly be so much stronger than what we were when he arrived, because let's be honest, we couldn't be much weaker. But we will face the next chapter with gratitude rather than regret. And let's be honest, Eddie Howe is probably going to move on to a great job. Maybe England, if he's happy taking a little bit less control over the whole proceeding. Or he might take another job at a top club in England. I hope not, to be honest. But either way, Eddie Howe will always be a Newcastle United legend. And when that happens, I really hope all sides leave with a smile on their face, because Howe deserves it. But it's becoming clear that Newcastle United are becoming a little bit stagnant, and I think it's not good for Newcastle and it's not good for Eddie Howe if the relationship continues, let's say, another 3-4 years. I still think Howe's got at least another season in him, but I think with the way that things have started last season, the way things have started this season, it turned around last season. We're not going to have the trophy this year. And I think it's going to be one of those now where Howe can move on to something bigger and better in England. Whether he does or not, again, it probably have to be a bit of a personality change for him as well. And Newcastle can look to the next chapter as well. I'll shed a tear when it happens, by the way, without a shadow of a doubt. He's been a huge part of the restoration of Newcastle United's identity. He'll forever, well, now and forever, he will be war ready. And he'll always have a place in Newcastle United fans' hearts. He's up there with Kevin Keegan. He's up there with Bobby Robson. Maybe, just maybe, we'll have to revisit that conversation on where he fits into the top 3 of the Premier League era, like we had this time last year. But he'll always be a fantastic manager. He'll always be one of ours. And when it does end, I hope it ends with a smile on everyone's face, because I would absolutely hate it if we're halfway through a season, Newcastle are 17th or something like that, Eddie Howe gets sacked and things turn sour. So I think both sides will want to end the relationship while it's in a good place. So there you have it. 10 predictions, 10 risks, 10 future arguments waiting to happen. I'll quickly go through all 10. Number 1 was that Lewis Miley will be nominated for Young Player of the Season. Number 2 was that Aston Villa will finish 3rd but won't be in the title race. The top prediction number 3 was that top 4 will distance themselves from the rest of the league. Prediction number 4 was that Newcastle United will qualify for Europe. Prediction number 5 was that Wolves will beat Derby's 11-point record, which means they're getting more than the 11 points. Prediction number 6 was that Spurs will finish closer to 17th than to Europe. Prediction number 7 was that Manchester City will win the Premier League. Prediction number 8 was that Hugo Eketike will be the best of the summer striker signings. Prediction number 9 was that Oliver Glasner will eventually be announced as the next Manchester United manager. And prediction number 10 is that Eddie Howe will leave Newcastle United at the end of the season. So there you have it. If half of these come true, I'll call it a win. And I hope it's 2 out of the 3 for Newcastle United. Lewis Miley, Young Player of the Season, and we qualify for Europe. And I'd love another season under Eddie Howe. We're maybe in the Conference League, winning something on the European front, tackling for the, I hate to say the title, but doing what Aston Villa are doing this season, because you're not playing the likes of Barcelona, Marseille, Bayer Leverkusen. Instead, you're playing Helsinki. I don't know why I've targeted them this episode, but it's just one in my mind. But I'll call it a win if half of these come true. And if all of them do, I'm putting the lottery on at the end of the season. But thank you very much, as always, for listening to the Daily Newcastle. If you've enjoyed this a little bit of a different Winter Wildcard style episode, let us know, and maybe it's something we'll look to do a little bit more often. Share these, argue about them, let us know your thoughts. Remind me of the ones I've got wrong in May. I've been Michael Grahamslaw. Check us out on socials at GSPN Newcastle. Stay warm over the winter. Enjoy the football, and I'll speak to you again soon. Ta-ra.
Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.